have now blurred my background. Okay. You have two options for goals. Option 1, a goal you know you will succeed at because you know you have the ability to succeed at it. To avoid risk or self-defeatism. To avoid the self-criticism. Or goals you think you may fail at. Goals you fear failing at. You think failing is possible, so that achieving it is meaningful. If you don't know you can succeed, then when you achieve it, then it will have more value. The greatest pleasure is relief from releasing something that you don't or can't, don't want to or can't hold within you. The greatest pleasure is relief from releasing something that you can't hold within you. That makes enough sense. Yeah. For reference, the original quote from the book is contextualized. Before he said this, he told the story of an emperor who asked his subjects, his ministers, what is the greatest pleasure of life? And some of them said it is the greatest pleasure to serve you, to see you, to serve the empire, etc. And one of them said the greatest pleasure is to shit. And the emperor said, you are going to need to prove it. So the minister said, all right, to prove it, I'll need some time, and I'll need you to go on a trip with me. And then he put the emperor in the middle of a camping tent and surrounded him with tents of women and I guess doing their duties, and then the people protecting them, I guess. And he didn't have the toilet tent, so, and the emperor couldn't shit. So the minister kept walking around the emperor, muttering to himself, where should I put the toilet? Until eventually he set up the toilet, and then the emperor went in and moaned with relief, while the minister outside said, do you agree with me now, your majesty? And the emperor said, yes, I agree. So that was the context for this moral of the story by the author. Anyways, so if you do not, I guess the idea is that if you do not overly seek pleasure from outside, but to seek relief from inside, I guess, then you will. I don't know. I'm just quoting the book. Oxytocin is the trust chemical and tendency to hurt. So apparently, at the moment you have a child, like when the child comes out and you hold the child, there's a huge flood of oxytocin in both the parents and the child, and because it's the bonding chemical. And also oxytocin is the good feeling you get when you feel trusted or feel trusting, when maybe you have a bonding moment. Maybe you talk about your troubles, or you listen to someone's troubles, or you have a moment to hug them, or something, and so on. I think handshakes also have oxytocin, and that's why handshakes have always been So like physical contact is involved, and handshakes are used for ceasefires, business relationships, and so on, and has always been for it. I think mostly because of oxytocin. By the way, I'm not saying that based on what I'm reading. I'm pretty sure Simon mentioned this as well. Anyways, cortisol can be triggered by deep subconscious traumatic associations. So there was a story of a woman in this book. I can't remember which book this one was, but where they mentioned how there was this woman who always got like felt a ton of panic whenever she heard her friends laugh. And the reason is because like after she went to a therapist or a psychologist, they discovered that the reason was because that was what she heard right before experiencing a horrible car crash. And now whenever she hears laughter, she experiences like a surge in cortisol and panic. So don't maybe you have traumatic experiences, but also just don't maybe expose yourself to people, to content, whatever that trigger your cortisol, I suppose, if you can. Mirroring negativity / suffering / crisis. So cortisol is contagious, and the reason is simply because when someone, I guess, like if you imagine a tribe, if someone starts panicking, it generally means there's trouble, a survival-based issue. And so you all need to work together to find the problem and then solve it. And the next note is, if you feel cortisol without knowing why, it will serve as a signal to you to find a problem. Because now cortisol means you have a problem, and if you don't know what it is, then you have to figure it out. Because you can't just say, okay, whatever, I don't know what the problem is, so it's fine. You have to find a problem. And if you look for problems, you'll find problems. And that's why you get these absurd like superstitions. You get these like sacrificial ceremonies. You get you tend to look for outlets to blame things on that are generally innocent, or maybe not innocent, but just an outlet. You just assume that this must be the entire problem, and it's because we are made to find problems, and you can find problems where there aren't any if you want to find one bad enough. Okay. Not being understood is correlated with survival, which is why it triggers being misunderstood triggers cortisol. And the example is that the book gave is that when we are babies, if we need food and then we cry and they don't understand what the problem is, then we don't get food. So basically it's like, if we're not understood, then we can't communicate our needs, and the needs will not be met, which is why it is ingrained in us that being understood is so important, because it's linked to a survival mechanism in somewhere in our brain. This one was mentioned in a previous video, but this is where I wrote this direct note, which is, a lizard will never condemn the world or find anything wrong with the world, because they will never imagine the world as anything other than it is. So our ability to find problems with the world is a result of our ability to imagine the world as something other than what it is. And there's two sides of this. One is, this is what allows us to make inventions, to make better lives for ourselves, to create new things. That's how humanity is possible. Two, this is what allows us to become even just mad at the world, or mad at circumstances, or feel that things are unfair, frustration, feeling stifled, and even feeling delusional, or even being delusional from the perspective of people outside, and in terms of what we believe things should be, believe the way things even are. If we delude ourselves into actually believing it, then we will genuinely see things that are not true. Genuinely, not generally. Genuinely. Okay, so two sides of that coin. Continued rewards does not equal continued dopamine, which creates disappointment. So if you do the same thing and get the same reward over and over, it stops returning dopamine. The dopamine drops off because now you've already associated with the action with the reward, so you'll keep doing that action. But we'll feel disappointed eventually, because if we don't feel rewarded neurochemically. And so then we seek more. So there are two things, which is random reward that keeps triggering dopamine, which is why gambling, loot boxes, and so on works and keeps us going. It's because if it's this action equals reward, then you don't need dopamine to keep going. You know exactly what you have to do to get the reward. But if it's random, say action, you don't know when the reward comes, but you need to do action, 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 reward. Action, 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 reward. Action, action, reward. So if it's randomized, you need something that keep you going during times when you don't get a reward. And that's why randomized reward still gives dopamine. And the reason it was needed was because back then, if you went hunting or foraging, you may not know how long it takes to get the reward. Sometimes it'll be better, sometimes it'll be worse, but you need to be able to keep going. And so we've developed a random reward system to keep us going. Also, there is stepwise reward, so that, like breadcrumbs, where you get a little bit closer to your goal, get dopamine, get a bit closer to your goal, get dopamine. And that also keeps you going. But if you don't get anything all the way, and the goal is all the way over there, you'll probably be like, I don't really want to go that far before I get any reward, when I could do a little bit here and get this dopamine here. So, because you don't really have, there's no single high, there's no single big reward that can actually replace a series of rewards, because it is measured by time rather than by intensity. Simple example is, can you just eat a month's worth of food and then not eat for a month? No. So the act of eating has to be rewarding because you have to keep doing it. And I think they've done studies where it's like, if they remove your ability to feel dopamine from eating, then you won't. Well, there's rats that are just like starve to death or something like that. Or, so eating in itself is rewarding and feels good. Okay, next. Wait. What time is it? Let me see. Okay, this is good enough.